when he talks about the kind of small kindnesses that we can all do for each other that can make all the difference in the world. I'm not ashamed to say that I cried, ladies and gentlemen. My small ounce of human emotion, it overflowed. Hey everybody, welcome to Feminist Frequency Radio. This is episode 63. I'm One Take Adams, and because Anita, our alpha wolf, has been taken out by hunters, or perhaps has just decided to go her own lonely road, I'm taking the lead on this fugitive journey with my fellow wayward wolf cub, Carolyn Pettit. Hey, Caro.
Ow, ow.
That was not pre-planned, folks. That is the kind of extemporaneous entertainment you're going to get from this week's episode. This is the show that asks you to be critical of the media you love, or alternatively, we're the feminist killjoys coming for your media, depending on your perspective. Today, we're going to be talking about the recently released second chapter of the narrative game, Life is Strange 2. After that, we'll finish the show by each sharing a little something in What's Your Freak-Out? Or What's Your Deal? I'm in the captain's chair. I'm bringing it back.
Oh, snap.
Now, on with the show. Carolyn, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. I'm actually at Anita's place, looking after Schnookums. As I think I've said before, I like to think of myself as a co-parent because I spend a good deal of time looking after Anita's cat when Anita's not around. And I'm just having a great time getting some quality time in with my fluffy little friend and, who I miss now that she doesn't live in the Bay Area with near me anymore. So, and, it's a lovely neighborhood here. The weather's been great. So I've been having a lovely week just kind of strolling around the neighborhood, digging the chance to be in LA for a bit.
Are you pretending like you're in an Airbnb?
Well, I can't quite do that because the one thing about Tig is she tends to track litter all over the place, her kitty litter. And so I'm kind of constantly on cleanup duty trying to mitigate, fight the battle against the growing mountains of kitty litter that are just collecting all over the house. So, there's definitely work involved on my part.
A little more housekeeping than would normally be involved in an Airbnb.
A little bit more. Yeah.
Let me ask you this. How much longer are you in LA?
About another 6 days, I think. 6 days.
I just want to make it clear that when I tell people that I live in LA, you and Anita and people who know me realize that when I say LA, I actually mean north of the city. I don't live in LA proper.
Yeah, the greater Los Angeles area.
Exactly. Definitely ex-urban. Listen, the fact that you've been here for a week already, are going to be here for essentially another week, and yet it's unlikely that we will hook up saddens me. So I'm hoping to get a lot of, intimate conversation time, either on the mic or off the mic. For this show. But before we get into that, just talking about our lives, can you give me some pop culture news?
I can bring it. All right. Yeah. So this episode, we're recording it a week ahead of its air date. So this news may not be piping fresh by the time it reaches you, the listener. But and you might be thinking, why aren't they talking about this big, story that just happened yesterday? And that's because it hasn't happened yet. So my apologies for that, but enjoy this reheated microwave leftovers pop culture news from last week.
Wow, you are really selling it.
I mean, look, people, we can't pull out all the stops week after week after week. You gotta, we're slumming it here a little bit this week. Recently, The Atlantic published a damning new piece about director Bryan Singer, including interviews with 4 more people who have come forward, with accusations about their experiences being abused by the director. However, Bryan Singer is nonetheless still slated to direct a new Red Sonja film. Now, Millennium Films, the studio which has hired Singer to direct the new Red Sonja movie, actually responded to the sort of controversy about them leaving Singer in the director's chair with a statement from producer Avi Lerner, that statement read, I continue to be in development for Red Sonja, and Bryan Singer continues to be attached. The over $800 million Bohemian Rhapsody has grossed, making it the highest-grossing drama in film history, is testament to his remarkable vision and acumen. I know the difference between agenda-driven fake news and reality, and I am very comfortable with this decision. In America, people are innocent until proven otherwise. So obviously, like, his use of the term fake news, you know, is super gross. Like, I mean, if you say that without irony, I just peg you immediately as like a Trump,
an idiot.
An idiot, or like, a Trump supporter. But you know, so he's just completely kind of blowing off all the concerns. You know, thankfully, actor Anthony Rapp did, you know, sort of come forward on Twitter and just really lay it down and say, any actor who agrees to work on this project is enabling an abuser. Like, he just laid it out like that, and hopefully that may have a chilling effect on the project and its ability to cast actors as long as Bryan Singer remains in the director's chair.
Yeah, Bryan Singer and Kevin Spacey both sort of, retreated into this super gross defensive stance whereby any criticism of them was characterized as homophobic, which was so heinous of them, because the problem is not that these are gay men. The problem is that these are predators and that these are abusers, and calling out that behavior is not homophobic. Now, yeah, we certainly should be conscious of the ways in which we, characterize their behaviors. But the fact of calling them out and calling out what they've done is not in and of itself homophobic. And they are not, they should not have any refuge from the consequences of what they've done, because they both have it, like, their personal identity is a marginalized one. Like, it was just so gross, the idea, that, like, these young men are lying or these stories are fake, because, Hollywood or the greater public has it in for gay men. Like, y'all, please, that's not what's going on here. And the story in The Atlantic, it was just, oh my God, like, it's just brutal to read what these young men went through, particularly these victims, these survivors who are still blaming themselves because, as a method of dealing with this trauma and maybe, like, trying to hold on to some bit of agency and autonomy, you will find them saying things like, I was into it, I was 17 and, I wanted to party. And so, part of me, wonders how much of this I brought on myself. No, you didn't bring this on yourself. You were in a situation in which someone with vastly more amounts of power than you took advantage of you and exploited you. You are not to blame in any way. Bryan Singer, fuck you. And fuck you, Avi Lerner.
Yes, extremely, extremely. All right, so in other entertainment news, the Best Picture, or actually rather the Oscar nominations have been announced since our last recording, and they, in many ways, they left a lot to be desired. I mean, as we feared, Green Book, is nominated for Best Picture, and Beale Street is not nominated, which is just
which blows my mind.
I know,
absolutely blows my mind.
I mean, what is it with white voters who kind of need these like racial reconciliation, movies, and I guess who are just kind of made uncomfortable or turned off by films that actually confront systemic racism and white supremacy and don't give viewers an easy way out, right? Which Green Book very much does. But, as frustrating and disappointing as that and other elements are, I do want to say that I was very pleased to see that Yalitza Aparicio, and I apologize if I'm not pronouncing that right, but Yalitza Aparicio is nominated for the category is called Best Actress. I don't like the word actress, generally speaking. It's such a weirdly gendered term, but so she is the second ever Mexican woman and the first ever indigenous woman to be nominated for Best Actress at the Academy Awards. And, I'm thrilled about that. Her performance in Roma is so delicate, sort of internal, like deeply, deeply felt. Really, she really is the center of that film, and she carries it with such strength, such like quiet strength and dignity and power. And I think it's great. And so before the nominations were announced, the New York Times asked her what an Oscar might mean to her, and she responded, "I'd be breaking the stereotype that because we're indigenous, we can't do certain things because of our skin color. Receiving that nomination would be a break from so many ideas. It would open doors to other people, to everyone, and deepen our conviction that we can do these things now." So, obviously it's very personally significant for her, and I do hope that it has more far-reaching effects as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when we talk about one of the benefits of services like Netflix or Amazon, folks have made the argument that we absolutely would not see some of the stories that we are seeing or some of the great talent that we're seeing without this multiplicity of new venues and alternative ways of seeing, because it's doubtful that a film like Roma would have opened widely in theaters and that, people across the globe would have had an opportunity to enjoy that film were it not for a service like Netflix. So big ups.
Yeah, absolutely. Definitely. The fact that if Netflix can use their power for good and showcase stories about people that center people who typically have not been centered in Hollywood movies or in movies that get support and financial backing and attention, then I'm all for that. Certainly.
Yeah, absolutely. And, Netflix is also bringing us the latest entry in the action gramps genre, which is my favorite, starring Miss Mickelson. So anybody want to talk polar with me, please hit me up on Twitter. You know where to find me.
Oh, Mads Mikkelsen. Right. Yes. Yeah. I hope that's good. I mean, I love Mads Mikkelsen. I don't know. Is it out already?
I believe so.
Okay, but you haven't watched it yet.
No,
okay.
I have not.
Okay.
So I will be curling up this weekend to watch my boy. All right. I'm fully expecting to love it.
And finally, just one last quick little bit of positive news. She-Ra has been renewed for a second season, so we'll all be getting more Adora, more Catra, more of Mermista's wonderful, quasi-sullen attitude. My more Bo,
Scorpia. Yes.
Yeah, the whole gang. So definitely, more of that fantastic theme song. Looking forward to that.
Folks, if you have not checked out She-Ra because you think like this is a show just for kids or it can't possibly be that great, I'm not interested in this, really just give yourself 25 minutes and just check out an episode because I promise you will enjoy it. It's absolutely wonderful.
Man, Catra in a tux, man.
Hey now.
Style goals.
Hey, y'all, did you know that we can keep bringing Feminist Frequency Radio to the airwaves because of you? It's true. If you are enjoying our show, please consider joining our podcast community at d.rip/femfreak. It's where you'll get access to some fun perks and bonus episodes, and really, at the end of the day, you're going to help us keep bringing feminist media criticism to the airwaves. So please head on over to d.rip/femfreak.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you for that compelling and not at all warmed over entertainment news. If people don't like it, they can lump it. We'll be back on the linear game later without Jeremy Bearimy type, reheated news. But let's get into the main topic of the day, which is Life is Strange 2, which I cannot wait to discuss with you.
Yeah.
So Life is Strange 2 by French studio Don't Nod Entertainment. Am I saying that correctly, Kara?
I believe so, yes.
Okay,
yes.
So Don't Nod Entertainment is a lyrical, languid, quietly devastating narrative game about the journey of hardship and discovery undertaken by Mexican-American teenager Sean Diaz and his younger brother Daniel after the tragic death of their father at the hands of the police. 2 chapters have been released so far of a planned 5. Caro, this was a recommendation that you made for us to talk about on the podcast. I couldn't be more delighted and more grateful that you introduced this to my life. But I have to say, for the benefit of listeners who don't know, I am a complete noob when it comes to video games. Like, you stream on Twitch every Thursday evening. Get on it, Twitch TV, y'all.
/FemFreak.
/FemFreak. And I watch you play games, or sometimes you and Anita play games, and I am, quietly jealous and frustrated because I don't know what's happening. I don't have access, or I didn't have access to a console. And also, I just felt overwhelmed by what I assumed were like the barriers to entry.
Sure.
As much as FemFreak is known for its in-depth, and really world-changing video game analysis, I never covered the video game beat, y'all. I knew nothing about it, so I just watched from the sidelines. So when you, recommended this, I was like, yes, this is my chance. Anita just gifted me a PS4 because she's a little angel person. I'm going to do this. It took me a long time to get used to that DualShock controller, y'all. But once I did, I was in. And this game was kind of perfect for someone who's not like accustomed to, shoot 'em up, quick action style games, because it's a narrative game and it's about choices, but it's about taking your time, and looking around and sort of thinking things through. So walk us through a little bit what the game is about. I mean, I gave a brief summary there, but tell us a little bit more about this game.
Yeah, so this is so it's Life is Strange 2. It has tangential connections to Life is Strange 1, but it's a completely different main story, completely different central characters and everything. It just takes place in the same universe, and there's the occasional allusion to things that happened in Life is Strange 1, but it's not central to the story by any stretch. It begins with this guy, you're playing as this guy, Sean Diaz, and he's hanging out with his best friend, Lila, and they're like planning to go to a party. And so the whole first part that night, and the whole first part of the game is you planning to go to the party, getting, snacks and drinks and some cash, and just with things that you might need, some blankets or whatever. And, you're kind of talking to your friend about this girl that you really like and who you're excited to see at the party that night. And is she into you? Is she not? Are you going to make a move? Are you not? All that stuff. And, so it's a very effective device because it really sets you up to kind of think about, this is, I'm going to go to this party tonight. It's normal teenage life stuff. And then the game takes a very alarming, very sharp turn when, this sort of racist. So your younger brother, Daniel, who's doing Halloween stuff. He's made fake blood and things. He gets into an altercation with this racist, teenager next door. He sort of accidentally maybe spills the fake blood on that young man. The young man just, flips out. Things get really heated, and basically a police car stops, and the white cop asks the Diaz kids to get down, right? The brown kids get down. The father comes running, starts pleading, in the kids' defense. And then, a gunshot rings out. The cop has shot their father. And at this point, a kind of shockwave of energy just explodes in the area, just unfettered kind of rage or horror takes kind of physical takes on physical force, and the police cars are flipped over, things are just kind of thrown back. It's this miniature wave of destruction, and you come to figure out that your younger brother Daniel has some kind of telekinetic powers that he himself is not even necessarily aware of, and certainly doesn't know how to control. and so then the game just becomes a road trip. Sean takes Daniel and just runs, and it just becomes this road trip of their adventures alone on the road, trying to survive, trying to get food, trying to find places to camp, and sort of trying to figure out what their long-term plan is. Daniel sort of has this idea that maybe they can make their way down to this town called Puerto Lobos in Mexico, which is where their father came from. And so that's sort of his plan right now, is try to make their way down into Mexico. But, whether that's going to remain his plan, whether that's going to come to pass, we don't really know yet.
This game it does something so wonderful, but also so harrowing, because what it does is force you to recognize how your decision-making is necessarily affected by who you are, others' perceptions of you, what your responsibilities are, what you understand your responsibilities to be. And the way that this can be something that is completely how each little decision can be something world changing, particularly for young people who do not have access to the same level of power or autonomy or resources that adults have, but also that people of color, and particularly Mexican and Mexican American immigrants have in this country as well. So you talk about how Sean's dad, Esteban, is killed by the police. So if this were a situation in which two young white kids had their father killed by police, the reaction to it, the town's understanding of it, police understanding of it, is going to be different, right? And also, if in fact those two young white kids had gone on the road, yes, we would absolutely still be concerned for them, but we would be concerned about them in different ways than we are for Sean and Daniel, So I found, as I was making decisions, and this is obviously deliberate, as I was making decisions, I'm trying to think the way that a 16-year-old Latinx kid would think in that situation. But there's the tension between that and me, Ebony, the 87-year-old grown-up who is safely at home with shelter and with food. And so there are things where I'm like, oh my God, these kids, they're not warm enough. They don't have hats and gloves, they don't have shelter. So on the one hand, when you have the option, you're at this roadside gas station that has camping gear. On the one hand, I want them to try and steal camping gear. On the other hand, as two young brown kids out in the middle of nowhere, rural Washington, I'm like, you can't do it. So I'm trying to keep these kids alive, but I also don't want them shot again. This game made me anxious in the best way, but I don't know how, if you were playing it straight through, and you were obviously better at a controller than I am, how long it would take you to play through each individual chapter. But I had to take significant breaks often because the anxiety that it provoked immediately, once shit starts going down, occasionally became too much for me. I was worried constantly.
Yeah, and to its credit, the game does not let you forget that they are brown kids, right? They there is a sequence that happens. You do stop at this sort of gas station, little general store at one point to try to find food and maybe other supplies, and the male shop owner, eventually, whether you steal anything or not, he is extremely belligerent towards you. He's very suspicious of you. And he basically straight up kidnaps Sean. Daniel runs away. Daniel sort of escapes, but Sean is kidnapped. And, it turns out the man knows that the police are looking for you because of the news stories out of Seattle where you lived before you ran away. But he straight up says things like, it's because of people like you that we need to build that wall. He calls Sean a thug, which has become this really racialized, term that usually means brown or black young man. It's very. I appreciate that the game is definitely trying to acknowledge to some degree, the country that we live in right now, and the sentiments that are brewing, or not that have been there, but that are maybe have been stoked, right? The fires have been stoked and are maybe kind of boiling over in among white people and all over the country. It's genuinely scary to be like on the receiving end of that totally like undeserved, outrageous kind of terrorizing that Sean experiences there.
Yeah, and so again, this brings me back to the notion that I am a complete video game noob, right? And so even though I work with you, even though I work with Anita, even though I know that my understanding of the modern video game landscape is quite narrow and very out of date, nevertheless, I have this image in my mind of like the archetypal video game, right? And it's like a shoot 'em up kind of actiony thing, or it's like, something where you're constantly like jumping and grabbing, etc., right?
Totally.
But it is the sort of thing whereby you can and maybe are encouraged to play a bit recklessly because there are no real consequences. So your character may die, but you'll just go back to the last save point and start over again. But it doesn't affect you emotionally in the way that something like this did. I truly am planning to play this over again, both chapters that have been released, and see if I'm able to bring myself to make what to me seemed like more reckless decisions. And it's not just reckless decisions or impetuous kind of, like teenage decisions, but sometimes, having the what I would call the benefit of a bit more life experience and maturity, there are conversations that I'm like, you know what? No, don't have this conversation with Daniel right now about his powers or about how our father died. Because he's not ready for that yet, or be kind to your younger brother. But where I actually like a 16-year-old, there are times when like I would snap. This is amazing how I was playing this game with like 4 different perspectives at all times.
Totally. Yeah. And definitely like things can be pretty dramatically different depending on the choices you make. I watched a friend play through episode 2, and at the end of his playthrough of episode 2, something quite horrifying happens that did not happen at the end of my playthrough of that episode because of different choices that we'd made in the midst of the episode. Let's talk a bit about episode 2 specifically, which I was definitely surprised. It did not hold back from the real heavy blows to these kids.
Jesus. Yeah. My partner was watching me play for a bit, and he had to get up and walk out of the room. And I think exactly when that happened, where he was like, I'm out. I can't watch this.
I was like really surprised, at the end of like the very first section, something really gut wrenching happens. And I just was thinking, my God, poor Daniel, God, this kid has been through the ringer, man. I mean, just all the stuff he's had to endure. Now this on top of everything else. But, in broad strokes, so episode 2 is mostly about, so Daniel seems to have come down with a cough. He's not doing well. So Sean makes sort of reluctantly, I think, the decision to go to their grandparents' home, the parents of their mother, who just sort of abandoned them, abandoned her own parents, just kind of abandoned, just disappeared, like ran away from everyone and everything that she knew, and seemingly. So there's a lot of kind of family tension there. But, and while there, they meet this very imaginative kid next door named Chris, who, sort of like, he is the son of an alcoholic. There's actually there was a whole free prequel to Life is Strange 2 called The Awesome Adventures of Captain Spirit, where you play as Chris, and, I don't know, you probably did not play Captain Spirit, right?
I did.
You did? Okay.
I did. And I desperately want to talk about that as well, because I found that, if anything, harder to play emotionally. And I would say, we'll come back around to this, but one of the things that I do want to say is, if you, hopefully I can say this without spoiling too much, but if you have certain types of like abuse in your past, this was a very hard thing to watch and make decisions in. It was, I would just say like, it's something, don't go into it expecting some sort of like, light, fluffy,
right.
Marvel post credits kind of thing. Like some heavy shit goes down, even in just that short interstitial game.
Yeah. And I mean, I will say for me personally, like I was a young child of an alcoholic father. I did absolutely escape into my extremely elaborate imagination pretty much constantly. And so, I did see a lot of myself as a young person in Chris. And I really thought the way that the Awesome Adventures of Captain Spirit lent power, to Chris's imagination as something kind of wonderful, the way that his imaginative musings take on a kind of life within the episode or the experience, was great. I mean, I think it really kind of, for me, as harrowing as some aspects of it are, with with your father being an alcoholic in the story, it also did for me capture that kind of wonderful feeling of being a kid and just being able to make believe just about anything and to fully just commit to it and really imagine it and play it out in your mind and everything.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I think both games or, both chapters and then the Awesome Adventures of Captain Spirit, it's so clear that these are children and, in the case of Sean, a teenager, but they very much read and have the affect of young people, And so what you're getting at with the way that a child can find, sanctuary in their imagination when the actual world outside is just, something that's very dangerous for them or incredibly tough to navigate. We aren't looking at the way like an adult would, exist in that space and the way that they might try to get out or, withstand that kind of relationship. We're looking at the way that a child would do it, and it felt very real and authentic.
Yeah, exactly. So throughout episode 2, I have to say, as Sean, like playing as Sean, I really felt like Daniel was being super reckless with his powers, right? I was like, oh my God, Daniel, what the F are you doing?
I know, right?
Like because it's like there's a moment where at their grandparents' house, Daniel like is tidying up the plates, right? But their grandmother, Claire, is right there. She just has her back turned. I mean, he is taking so many risks. And like, I'm actually worried, like, Daniel, like the power could kind of go to his head, that he won't, as a young person, understand why he has to really keep it under control and not kind of just use it as a toy or as like some like party trick or whatever. Because anyway, I was repeatedly alarmed throughout this episode at Daniel just making sort of flagrant use of his powers.
Well, especially because like later, and not that much later, Sean and Daniel are complaining about how much cleaning they have to do at their grandparents' house. And literally what they have to do is do their laundry and tidy up their room. And they're complaining about it. I'm like, you were just living in an abandoned shack in the woods, shitting in a bucket, eating ravioli for 3 meals a day, like a little bit more gratitude, but I get it, this again, kind of the kid mind. I have to say, having played by recommendation, The Awesome Adventures of Captain Spirit before then playing the second chapter of Life is Strange 2, I was a little bit disoriented by the shift in the characterization of Claire, their grandmother, because the sense we get of her in Captain Spirit is of someone who is so soft and so caring and so giving. We don't see the side of her that then her grandsons are going to see. And, that makes sense because her relationship to them is different. And it's largely shaped by her relationship to her daughter, who has cut ties with the entire family, not just her sons, but with her parents as well. But there was a sadness that Claire wasn't that kind of just like mama bear, soft figure for them to rush to and get hugs and be taken care of without any hard edges. Because after they have to leave Brody in chapter 1,
the Seth Rogen, the character
exactly.
who would be played by Seth Rogen if this were a live action thing.
Exactly. Who was just so wonderful, I was hoping for another kind of Brody-like figure in the character of Claire. So I was disappointed, but I recognized that, people are complicated and relationships have nuance. And even someone as, with as many problems as Chris's dad, the alcoholic who's still mourning his wife, as many problems as he has, he's not just an up and up villain.
Right, absolutely
the
not.
game doesn't want us to see him as just a villainous character. And so I do, think that it's smart in a way that the picture that we get of him in The Adventures of Captain Spirit, we don't get that background in chapter 2 itself.
Yes.
Because I think it would affect how we see him and the decisions that we make.
Definitely. And so, one thing that just philosophically I like about the Life is Strange game. So the season 1 did this as well, and season 2 is certainly carrying on the tradition, is that these games often will just give you moments, like places where like your character will just sit still in a place, and maybe there's a song playing, and it'll use different camera angles to and it, even when things are bad for Sean and Daniel, like this game really is very interested in taking its time and giving you, the player, time to just kind of stop and be in a moment for a while, to just be. And I do love that it the way that it uses different camera angles and things during those moments, because it really helps give you a sense of the character existing in a very specific space, right? And it makes you think more about like the just the environment they're in, the decor, the warmth of it, or the coldness of it, just the texture of it. All of those things really come through, and I just love that.
Yeah, I did too. I even though it took me quite a bit of time to get used to maneuvering and kind of using the camera, to get like a 360, view of things. I appreciated the time that I was given to figure that out in the game. And also the fact that, because I would periodically stop and then go back and do things differently. The ability to discover like new, like things to check out. Like the game is so giving. So if you walk straight, through just like looking ahead, you will see some things. But if you stop and look up to the sky or, crouch down to the ground, you will find other things. And maybe they advance the narrative and maybe they don't. Maybe it's just something interesting that Sean sees to look at or that Daniel is picking up. Like maybe it's more pine cones, or maybe it's just something funny. But you do get the sense that there's a complete world there. And that you want to kind of immerse yourself in it, and the game will give you the opportunity to immerse yourself in it. And there are, scenes in this game that are absolutely stunningly rendered, just beautiful. And because Sean is an artist, occasionally the game will give you the opportunity to draw these things. And so you will stop and it will make you, hold a button and observe and kind of sketch the lines of a landscape and then draw them yourselves in his sketchbook. I absolutely love that.
Yeah, I do too. And probably what I love most about the Life is Strange games is their focus on human connection. I think that the meeting Brody in episode 1 is a very memorable kind of experience. Like that is this kind of powerful, just this connection, this sort of happenstance connection that of the sort that maybe happens when you're on the road, right? When you're traveling. And my favorite, even though we don't get very much of her, my favorite character in episode 2 is this young woman named Cassidy, who is this musician who's strumming a guitar at the Christmas market. And you can like just stand there and listen to her play her
beautiful song.
Yeah, like a really beautiful song. And just like for somehow, like, even though the conversation between Sean and Cassidy is quite brief, I really feel like I'm starting to get a sense of who Cassidy is. And so she and her like male traveling companion, they like ride the rails, they're travelers, they're on the road. But she does say that they're going to Humboldt County for work. And if the tiny little teaser post-credit like glimpse that we get is any indication, it does seem that Sean and Daniel may end up at a pot farm, presumably working alongside Cassidy. So I'm already looking forward to learning more about her, seeing how that connection develops. I just feel like the relationships, the connections, both the fleeting ones and the lasting ones, in this series, are so great. And it's great to play a game that is so focused on human connections and relationships, that sees them as really meaningful and important. And I'm just going back to Brody in chapter 1. I did honestly cry after that scene was over. I was so worried for the boys, because after they make their escape from the redneck gas station owner, and then they stumble upon Brody and his station wagon in the woods, and Sean has had an interaction with him earlier in the game, and he seems like just a cool guy, discount Seth Rogen, but nevertheless, having just come out of that very harrowing situation, I wondered, is the game gonna throw me another curveball and have him be some sort of predator that they have to escape from? Because at that point, all bets are off. So the fact that he wasn't, that he was so caring and able and willing to listen, that he was just such an honest, authentic person. And that, when he talks about the kind of small kindnesses that we can all do for each other that can make all the difference in the world, I'm not ashamed to say that I cried, ladies and gentlemen. My small ounce of human emotion, it overflowed. And even though, of course, there is conflict, and there needs to be conflict, and I'm glad that there are characters in this series who represent the awful shit that we're dealing with right now. And I am so glad that fundamentally this game, is about as I said, the beauty of authentic connections between human beings who are fundamentally good and fundamentally trying to help each other in this often cruel, harsh, beyond understanding world where, any horrible thing could happen at any moment. Yeah. Can't recommend it enough. Do yourself a favor and have a friend like Anita who gets you a PS4. Then once you've gotten that done, you want to get yourself a season pass to Life is Strange 2. Yeah. Because when the new chapters come out, you're definitely going to want to play them. As many thumbs up as I can give to this game. Awesome. Awesome. Okay, so now, once again, what's your deal? We give the people what they're asking for. Let's share with them what we're freaking out about this week. Carolyn, tell me, what's your deal? Yes, the return of everybody's favorite segment, What's Your Deal? Completely different from What's Your Freak Out? So I am super late to the party on this one. I admit it, but each night here that I've been hanging out at Anita's place, I decided, what? I watched the first few episodes of Killing Eve. I sort of appreciated them, but they didn't really fully grab me. But maybe I should give the show another chance. And man, like, For me, I think episode 3 is really when things start just clicking.
Holy
and
shit,
just the
yeah.
and the show just starts firing on all cylinders. And because then, once the cat and mouse game is truly like afoot, it is just nonstop, right? It is just one, thrilling or heart-wrenching or, encounter after another. My God, just the dynamic between Sandra Oh's character, Eve Pilastri, and Villanelle. I mean, there's two women who, respect each other in some twisted way, but also it's a fundamentally antagonistic relationship. And but they're both so intelligent, and it's just fascinating to watch them pursue each other and try to outsmart each other and everything. I was a little worried, I was a little worried that Eve was gonna let herself kind of be seduced by Villanelle, which I'm I wanted to scream at the TV, do you remember that she murdered Bill? Do you remember that?
Oh, and that was so brutal.
But thankfully, it's just a delicious show. I mean, those relationships are so great. And both lead actors are fantastic. I think Jodie Comer is fantastic as just, at playing the fact that Villanelle really enjoys being who she is. She just loves it. The joy that she takes in being this kind of whimsical killer, and not being bound by the rules of ordinary society. So anyway, yes. You've all probably, heard about it, or maybe you probably watched it already months ago, but I'm throwing my recommendation into the hat for Killing Eve. If you haven't already watched it, give it a chance. Maybe, as I said, if the first few episodes don't grab you, stick with it, and I think you'll find that it really just starts flying around the third episode.
Oh my God, such a good show. I'm so glad it's going to be back for season 2, and that Carolyn Martin's, my favorite, my wife, Fiona Shaw, will be back on my screen. So what am I freaking out about? Just as a reminder, we are recording this fairly close to the time when old Roger Stone was arrested, but by the time this comes out, who knows what other news will have happened related to, Trump and his cabal of fucking circus clowns. Having heard the news on Friday, January 25th, that Roger Stone, self-identified dirty trickster, political fixer, had been arrested, I watched the Netflix documentary Get Me, Roger Stone, which is a sort of chronicle of the rise, fall, and then rise again of this political fixture who has been around since the Nixon administration, when he was, quite young, and just is known for kind of either pioneering or refining all of the dirty political tricks in the book in aid of a conservative agenda. And so the picture we get of this, kind of roguishly amoral character is fascinating. But what is most fascinating to me is that, as I said, I watched it this weekend, and it was the same weekend that a lot of people were watching the Ted Bundy documentary on Netflix. And there was this, sort of furor over the fact that there was a significant number of people who were like, God, Ted Bundy was hot. And then people rightfully saying, I need you to question your life choices here. Think about what you're saying. Mm-hmm. There is a way in which we are fascinated by white male badness, and we allow ourselves to be charmed by it, to write them endless checks, to harm people, to give them the ability to write their own mythology into legend and fact in a way that we do for absolutely no one else. And so Roger Stone, both as a person and as a lobbyist from his firm, Black Manafort Stone, is responsible for lobbying for some of the worst dictators on the planet. This man is directly responsible for people's lives being lost. And yet in this documentary that I watched, Get Me Roger Stone, you have people relating these stories while chuckling to themselves over how funny he can be, or, how, much of a dandy he can be, over the fact that he's got a Richard Nixon tattoo. And
he's such a card.
Yeah, he's a character. And I just think, whether it's Roger Stone or whether it's serial killer Ted Bundy, we, are allowing ourselves a certain amount of emotional and psychic distance on these monsters. And no, I'm not saying Roger Stone is a serial killer, but he's a horrible person, in a way that we are not fascinated by any other form of villainy, And it's fascinating to me. The documentary Get Me Roger Stone, it's very interesting. There are parts of it that are entertaining, but it's fascinating to watch, these longtime political journalists, other political fixtures, even if they are not conservatives or not members of the GOP themselves, sort of saying like, yeah, I've known Roger forever. He's been such a character. Ha ha ha, that guy. And you're like, think about what you are saying. Think about what we are allowing him to do, because he puts a gloss of, sort of showmanship on his evil. But yes, it's a really interesting, and it's very well done documentary at the same time that, I was kind of horrified by the people who are in it. So Get Me Roger Stone. Check it out on Netflix. If you want to share what you're freaking out about, if you want to tell us what your deal is, Scott, I'm so smooth. Submit your own freak out and it might make it onto the show. Just head on over to femfreak.com/freakout. That's FREQOUT. Okay, that is our show. You can catch us back here every single Wednesday, but of course the fun is not over for everyone. Stay tuned for our bonus episode, which is only available to backers of this podcast, which you can be. Just head over to d.rip/femfreak. Now, before we head into the bonus, I want to say that next week on FemFreak Radio, we will be globetrotting with the new Netflix revamp of Carmen Sandiego. So make sure you are subscribed to the show so you know exactly when that episode drops. And if you are dying for more jibber jabber in your life, tune into our Star Trek Discovery Recap Freecast, which is back. That's the show that Anita and I do, talking about latest episodes of Star Trek Discovery. And it's basically just being mind blown by how ambitious that show is and how far it falls. You can find it wherever all the best podcasts are kept. If you are enjoying this show, please rate and review us on iTunes and tell your friends too. You can check out all of our work and all of our other podcasts at feministfrequency.com. So be sure to follow us on Twitter at FemFreak to stay up to date on all the news. You can find us on Twitter at Anita Sarkeesian for Anita. Caro?
I am at Carolyn Michelle.
I am at Somebody Save the Babies. Find me on Twitter. Our producer is Phil Serkis, who also composed our theme music. We got technical support by Sarah Norales, production assistance by Taylor Simmons, and art by Jamie Varon. We will see y'all next week.
Later.